Right, and with that, let's call the City Council work session for June 7th, 2021 to order for the City Council portion. And then we'll, why don't we call the Planning Commission portion to order as well?
Yeah, Jeff Musil, Planning Commission Chair. I'd like to call our portion of the June 7th meeting to order as well.
All right, and a roll call for the council, please, Sue.
Councillor McBride.
Here.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Yarnell Holloman.
Here.
Councillor Martinez Blancarte.
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Present.
Councillor Bacon.
Here.
Councillor Finley.
Here.
And then Jeff, do you want me to call for Planning Commission as well?
Go ahead and call up Planning Commission.
Jason Dale. Okay, no Jason. Jeff Musil.
Present.
Robert Sherry.
Present.
Jenna Morris. Chris Wright. Charles Aban.
Here.
Sorry if I messed up your name. And Sharon Capri is absent tonight.
All right, well, thank you very much. Charles, how do you pronounce your last name?
Aban.
Aban, okay.
A-B-A-N. Yeah.
Aban, thank you so much. All right. So council agenda and meeting, folks, anything for this evening's meeting? All right, seeing no hands. What about business items for this evening? All right, again, seeing no hands. Let's move to item 5A, the work session on middle housing, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and townhomes. Again, referring to HB 2001.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So tonight we have our work session on what we call the other middle housing, tris, quads, cottage clusters, and townhomes. This is different than what you have later at your regular business session where you have a public hearing on duplexes. So we're going to talk about all this other, and then you're going to have to put that all away as you move into a public hearing on a different topic. So we have with us tonight Elizabeth Decker from Jet Planning and Heather Austin from 3J Consulting. And so Heather's going to walk through the PowerPoint that was in your packet. And as we go through it, if you do have questions, please stop and ask. I know sometimes it's hard to keep those questions and, you know, hold them for 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes. So if you do have them, just let the mayor or the planning commission chair know, and we will stop and we will answer the questions as we proceed forward. So Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Doug, members of the City Council and members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Doug said, I am Elizabeth Decker with Jet Planning, part of the consulting team that's been working with the City of Newberg since, about last August to work on middle housing code updates. So we're here tonight to talk about that other middle housing. I like to call it a little tongue twister, see how fast you can say triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, and cottage clusters, and keep it all straight. So, you know, you can count tonight how many times I say it, and then let me know my total. So HB 2001 for medium and large cities has several components. So the first being the medium city duplex component that the city has been working on, and you are poised to review in your regular session for City Council. Planning Commission has already had a public hearing on that. And then the large city component, when the City of Newberg crosses the line to 25,000 people, that is the legislative distinction between medium and large. Then these other middle housing types, the triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, and cottage clusters come into effect. And so Newberg has been very proactive and forward thinking, knowing that you're right on the line. And so Doug has worked with DLCD to secure this funding and to work with our consultant team to ensure that the code is being prepared for both the immediate medium city and the soon to be large city requirements. So we're working on adding those middle housing options, you know, in addition to just, you know, legislative compliance that doesn't get many people excited. There are also some great local needs in terms of addressing specific housing needs in Newberg that were identified in your 2019 HNA. And so these additional housing types hopefully are intended to slot right in and meet the needs of some of Newberg's households. So as discussed, we have split this project into two components, the duplex and the other middle housing code. We kicked off the whole thing with a code audit to review the status of the code and identify opportunities for the duplexes that are pending adoption this evening and the other middle housing code updates. The City of Newberg has some additional time on that, but again, Doug is really leading the charge here, and we will have a final draft by the end of June as part of this contract, and then the adoption process will kick off in the fall. We have been able to engage with the public through a variety of these, virtual engagement opportunities. And so where we have landed in terms of some middle housing code is some concepts that we want to help walk you through. So again, it's the triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses and cottage clusters. And when we're thinking about these housing types and how they might apply in Newberg, there's a couple different scenarios we're trying to address and to permit through the code. So we need to be thinking about both new construction, so an empty lot being developed with a brand new development, as well as additions or conversions of existing buildings. So just like now you can have a single family home and add an ADU in the back. Could be possible depending, of course, on the home and the lot. You have an existing single family home and you internally divide it into a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex, or even add some detached structures elsewhere on the lot so that you get to that duplex, triplex, or quadplex through an addition. And whether it's new construction or these additions, conversions, there are opportunities to slot these into both infill neighborhoods, so individual lots, as well as entirely new neighborhoods could include a mix of middle housing going forward. So we want to make sure that the code provisions cover all of these different scenarios. And so as we're implementing HB 2001, since Newberg has taken this two-track approach, addressing the duplexes first and then all the other middle housing, we can really highlight that duplexes are in some ways the simpler piece because the language in HB 2001 essentially creates an equal sign. It says a duplex is equal to a single family dwelling. Wherever and whatever you can do with a single family dwelling, you can do the exact same thing for duplexes. So it means on every individual lot where a single family dwelling can be permitted, you can permit a duplex. Now, when we get to the other middle housing types, there's a little bit more nuance and discretion. So all those housing types need to be permitted in all residential zones where single family dwellings are allowed. But you'll see as we start talking through these concepts that there are additional siting factors, particularly minimum lot sizes, that can apply to these other housing types in recognition that they are a little bit different than a single family detached dwelling in terms of overall scale. So they are generally seem to be slightly more impactful than duplexes. The tools that we have from the state and sort of the sideboards that are guiding implementation locally is the state went through a complex year-long rulemaking process that resulted in new Oregon administrative rules, Division 46, and those are termed the minimum compliance standards. And so cities that comply with those are deemed to be in compliance. And then the state also developed a model code that takes those minimum compliance standards and it first of all translates them into zoning code language, and second of all, in some cases, builds upon them. So, some of the numerical standards are easiest to represent. For example, the minimum compliance, as we'll talk about, the cities can have a minimum parking of 1 space per unit, and the model code is a bit more aspirational and suggests using 0 spaces, having no minimum parking. So in between those two is really the area where we have worked to develop the code recommendations for Newberg, and we got a lot of input from our advisory committee and some public open houses and surveys on different topics, which side of that channel to fall on. So we really have a mix of standards. It's meant to be modular in that sense. And as we look across the city, of course, the key is that this applies in all residential areas. So for Newberg, that's the R1, R2, R3, RP, and AR zones. R1 certainly being the lightest yellow and the greatest amount of land in the city. These middle housing provisions also apply in master plan and specific plan areas where most of the new development is expected in Newberg. So we've made some targeted changes that we'll talk about to those provisions just to create parity between all the areas in the city. And while this is expected to apply broadly, geographically across the city, the rate of adoption and the number of these new units, might not be an overwhelming tidal surge, shall we say. So some of the initial estimates are that, allowing these additional housing types might result in a bump of about 3% additional units. So that's a very broad statewide lens. We could drill down into what it means, but I bring it up only to say that although we're permitting it broadly, there's no quadplex ferry that's coming around overnight and turning every lot into a quadplex. Development trends will be interesting to see, but likely still include a healthy mix of different residential options, including single family detached, but hopefully, some experimentation in this middle housing realm. So thinking about code concepts, what we're trying to accomplish, this is sort of the high level overview with these middle housing concepts is, first of all, we need to add some definitions for middle housing types. Good land use lawyers always tell you, read the definitions first. And that tells you, in this case, it really introduces and defines these new middle housing types that the city is working to permit. Then we work into the uses and making sure that all of those middle housing types that we've just defined are permitted in all the residential zones, including all the master plan and specific plans. We're also going to introduce minimum lot sizes for those middle housing types. As I mentioned, they can be different than single family detached minimum lot sizes in the same zones. For the most part, on those minimum lot sizes, where the code will maintain the existing dimensional standards, so things like height and setback and lot coverage, with some fine tuning that we'll talk about. But for the most part, stays the same. The idea being that the amount of building area and the scale of development will be the same regardless of the number of units within it. A big change, additional code language, certainly. It comes in the form of introducing some new design standards that address some of the functional aspects of how these middle housing units relate to the street and to each other. So they're more about site design than architectural or building design standards. We're not regulating any architectural or aesthetic pieces with them. And then the other key component in terms of making that site work for middle housing is revising the parking requirements to meet essentially that minimum compliance standard of 1 parking space per dwelling unit, with providing some changes to the access and parking area layout options to make that parking more functional. So diving into what that means piece by piece, in terms of definitions, we need to add some new definitions. And the one that I'd call out is similar to duplexes. For the triplexes and quadplexes, the definitions allow for any configuration of 3 or 4 units that are attached, like you see on the left, or detached, like you see on the right. And so this idea of a detached duplex or triplex or quadplex is a new innovation, so to speak, in middle housing. The idea just being that it could provide some additional flexibility for how these units are configured, could incentivize the retention of existing dwelling units. As I mentioned, some of those options to add on to an existing lot by adding additional units. If there's lot area in the side or the rear yards. And could also, even if they were all new units, provide a little bit more privacy for the individual units, might meet consumer preferences. So just about adding some flexibility, but a little bit different approach in those definitions. In terms of the uses, this is where we get to dig into the master use table for the different residential zones. And all of these housing types that we're proposing are going to be permitted in all of the residential zones. And so townhouses are already permitted. We are changing them from a special use that requires review against certain standards to an outright permitted use, the same as single family detached dwellings. And then we're adding triplexes, quadplexes, and cottage clusters into that use table and permitting them in all the zones as well. And when we say that it's permitted in the zone, the key then is defining what size lots can be developed with these housing types. And so they are tied and calibrated based on the lot sizes for single family and duplex, single family detached and duplex minimum lot sizes that you see in the first row. But then the lot size for triplexes and quadplexes and cottage clusters, those are the size for triplex is 5,000 square feet, or whatever the minimum lot size would be. In the R3 zone is the higher density zone. And so right now you get 1 unit per 1,500 square feet. And so we carried that formula forward. And so that works out to 4,500 square feet per unit. Likewise, it's a minimum of 7,000 for the quadplexes and cottage clusters, except in the R3 where the allowed lot area of 1,500 square feet per unit translates to 6,000 square feet. And townhouses, there's not much nuance. It's sort of like Ford's Model T, right? You can have any color you want except black. You can have any minimum lot size you want as long as it's 1,500 square feet. That goes along with a 20-foot lot width. And so there's some analysis that the state conducted, economic analysis of what size lots tend to make more feasible townhouse products. And through the rulemaking process, this is really the number that they arrived at. And so that's what all cities are working on implementing. And together, these different minimum lot sizes create the de facto maximum densities, right? If you can have 3 units on 5,000 square feet, you can divide that out and translate that to an acreage basis. But the City of Newberg's code doesn't have a maximum density beyond these minimum lot sizes. So we're not proposing that. There are density targets you'll hear a little bit more about in the duplex code, but the density targets are not ceilings. And so just any of these developments should be within the range of the targets, and there's no conflict now with the density standards in the code as long as the minimum lot sizes are met. So on those lots, the dimensional standards are going to address the height and the bulk and the scale of these developments. So we've proposed very minimal changes to these dimensional standards. The idea being that, essentially the same building envelope will apply. The height, and there were some changes with the duplex code in the R2, RP, and AR to slightly increase the building coverage from 40% to 60% and the height from 30 feet to 35 feet. So those changes are already shown in this table. And the only additional change that we're proposing is for townhouses specifically in the R1 zone to increase the building coverage to 60% and to increase the height to 35 feet. And that's in recognition of the particular scale of townhouse projects and the fact that that they're on those smaller 1,500 square foot lots. They don't have side yards. And so a larger building coverage really is more appropriate for that type of housing. And in addition, that 35-foot height allows for a full 3-story development, given that most townhouses use most of the first floor for an attached garage for parking. And so that increases the parking availability while still retaining 2 full floors for living area. So add some flexibility there. And then one small change for the cottage clusters. The whole concept around cottage clusters is that it's more units at a smaller scale. And part of that smaller scale is capping them at a 25-foot height limit or 2 stories. So we introduced that in all zones. Okay, so in terms of project sizes and trying to wrap your head around what these projects could look like, townhouses, there's some flexibility here between the minimum compliance and the model code. But the direction that we heard from the advisory committee and what's proposed in the code is to allow up to 4 attached townhouses in the R1 zone, the lower density single family zone, but go up to an option of 8 attached units in the R2, R3, RP, and AR zones. As we understand it, because of some financing reasons, 4 units is likely to be the most common configuration. That's what's most popular with builders today. So that's, likely what you'll see in all zones, at least, as the market is currently formulated, but there is some additional flexibility in those higher density zones if there were a project that wanted to take advantage of it. In terms of the cottage clusters, the requirement there is for a minimum of 3 units. And so savvy code readers such as yourselves will probably note that that creates some overlap between a cottage cluster with 3 units or 4 units and a detached triplex or quadplex. And the idea is really just that the code is going to create options. And if there is a benefit on a particular site to doing a 3-unit cottage cluster versus a triplex, that we've built that flexibility into the code and that there's more than one path. The idea is that, they don't need to be mutually exclusive. There could be certain portions of it that work better for certain projects and certain sites than others. So, but there is that overlap to acknowledge. And then in the R1 zone, again, we're looking for a slightly smaller scale, compatible with, what is currently predominantly single family detached. So it's a maximum of 8 units in a cluster. And then in those higher density zones, up to 12 units in a cluster. And that's a cluster is the number of units that are sharing a central courtyard or open space. So you could have, more than one cluster, much like grapes growing in the vineyards. You could have multiple clusters per parcel. And then the individual cottages within those clusters, very strict standard that comes straight out of HB 2001 for a 900 square foot maximum footprint for cottages. They can be smaller than that, but the footprint can't exceed 900 square feet. And if you remember back, the 25-foot height limit or 2 stories means that essentially the total size could be up to 1,800 square feet. Many cottages are have more a partial second story, so we'll see what those average sizes wind up being, but those are the options. And then when it comes to the design standards, right? Everyone knows good design when they see it and bad design when they see it. But what's really important under Oregon's housing law is that cities apply only clear and objective design standards. Of course, what's funny about that is that there's nothing clear and objective about determining if language is clear and objective, right? Sometimes you sort of have an Alice in Wonderland moment where, it's like, well, I think this is clear, but is it really? Could someone else interpret it a different way? Essentially, anytime you can use numerical options or something like a menu of design choices, those are really great, clear and objective design standards. So in order to achieve that for these new middle housing types, there are revisions proposed to the townhouse standards that already exist in code. And then there are new triplex and quadplex, as well as cottage cluster standards being proposed. And a lot of these design standards that are proposed come directly from that model code. And so they've been thoroughly vetted through that rulemaking process in the state to meet the requirement for clarity and objectivity. So that's a real benefit. And generally they address design features like the entryways for these units, window coverage, garage location, and driveway approaches, how those are integrated into the facade for all housing types. And then for cottage clusters, they also address the courtyard layout and requirements, as well as how the units need to be clustered. So some additional standards there. And the model code also comes with some diagrams to help illustrate this. So here are some examples on these main entrances, for example, and these apply to all the housing types that we're talking about. Essentially saying that you need to have a main entrance either facing the street, opening onto a porch, which isn't pictured here, or if you have a detached plex scenario or a cottage, the main entrances can open onto a common open space that's then connected to the street by a sidewalk, as you see on the right. So just trying to create that connectivity between the street and the unit so that there's, you know, a welcoming open face. Or as I like to call it, the passing the trick or treat test, right? If you're a kid walking down the sidewalk, trying to, you know, find a place to trick or treat on Halloween, could you find the door? You're motivated by candy, so you're probably gonna, you know, look pretty hard, but can you find the door? When we look at the minimum window coverage, this is just calculating a percentage of the facade, and the number that we got back is from minimum compliance and model code is a minimum of 15% of the facade that's covered by transparent windows or doors. And then for townhouses, there's this additional requirement about defining architectural features. So something like a dormer, a recessed entryway, a bay or a balcony, front porch, any of those options could qualify. And there's a requirement to have at least one of those per unit in a townhouse project. So for example, if this were a 4-unit project, you can see they have exceeded the requirements and have more than one per unit. So this would meet that standard. And when we get to the cottage courtyards, the key there is really about creating this cluster effect and making sure that at least half of the cottages in a cluster open directly onto that common courtyard, that there are pedestrian pathways throughout the cottage project linking all of the cottages to the courtyard, and that the courtyard itself meets both quality and quantity standards. So the quantity meaning 150 square feet per cottage agglomerated into this central courtyard, and then some quality standards in terms of meeting some minimum dimensions, that it's centrally located, and the types of improvements that can be located there. And then last, but certainly not least, we get to the parking standards. As I mentioned, minimum compliance generally sets this requirement at 1 off-street parking space per unit. And, you know, there's an option to go lower than that. We did not hear a lot of interest in bringing the parking minimums down any lower than 1 space through our work with the advisory committee and certainly the public surveys. And open houses, we didn't hear a lot of interest in that. So the proposal in the draft code is to use that the 1 off-street parking space minimum. In addition to the number of spaces, there's certainly some questions about how it gets configured. So for the triplexes and quadplexes, we really wanted to build on some changes proposed with the duplexes. And what that means is making sure that there are options for 1 or multiple driveways per lot, but capping that at up to 32 feet or 50% of the lot frontage, whichever is, I think it's whichever is less, and that can be used for the driveways. And then also just, you know, some refinements, making sure that there are 2 driveways on corner lots where they're both local streets, so that you can split up some of the accesses. And that if a lot is going to include those multiple driveways, that there's that minimum 22-foot spacing in between them in order to preserve the full length of an on-street parking space rather than just chopping up the frontage and eliminating any on-street parking, right? If you eliminate all the on-street parking in exchange for off-street parking, your net parking gain, you know, is pretty low. Whereas if the driveways can be configured to preserve some on-street parking as well as add off-street parking, then you're looking at a net positive. So that's what the parking driveway standards are intended to do. Townhouse driveways are really one of the more challenging issues, I think, in terms of balancing different design objectives. So the model code, though, is very clear, and in this case, the minimum compliance as well, that cities must allow an option for up to a 12-foot wide driveway per 20-foot wide lot for a townhouse. So if you're doing the math with me, that means there's only 8 feet of lot frontage left that's not a driveway. So that can be pretty narrow, which I think, you know, there are some trade-offs there, but that is the requirement. And what the city can do is add additional options. So for shared access or paired driveway options that provide some alternatives and hopefully preserve more lot frontage. So looking at what that could mean for townhouses, you can see the individual driveways on the left is something that has to be permitted, but also these shared driveways where you put the two driveways next to each other and create a larger space in between adjacent pairs of units is an option that we have inserted into the code. And then also some different ways to use shared access easements to consolidate the access and get some of these driveways off of, reduce the street frontage. So these shared access easements can be more complex and, individual developers or property owners may or may not like the idea of sharing them. So, these are an option, but they can't be mandated in the code, but we have added them. And then cottages have an interesting mix, right? They have both individual garages that can be added as well as shared vehicle parking areas. So it could be a mix or one or the other of those standards. And there are different code standards proposed for these shared parking areas to make sure that they're adequately buffered from adjacent residential uses, as well as from those garages, making sure that they're not along the street frontage and dominating the landscape. So some additional standards there. Of course, we need to address all of these concepts and carry them through to the master plan. So some changes to the plans as well as the implementing code for those. And then I want to turn it over to you all for some questions about what all this could mean for the city of Newberg and any refinements or questions you'd like to see in the draft that we prepare by the end of the month, knowing that we will come back and be engaged in the adoption process with you to do some final fine tuning. Thank you.
All right, well, Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you very much. Why don't we start with city councilors? If anyone has a question, raise your hand and I will try to catch it. And if not, then I'll turn it over to Chair Musil and we can go with the planning commissioners. Up there we go, Mike.
So the question I have is are all of these changes, they've been mandated by the state? Is that correct? To where if we wanted to have, let's say, bigger lot sizes or something for one project, could we do that? Can we decide that?
There are areas where there's discretion at the local level and areas where there aren't. So in that particular example, requiring larger lot sizes would not meet the minimum compliance standards. So that would not meet the HB 2001 requirements.
Right, Chair Musil, any questions from the planning commissioners?
Thank you, Mayor. Any commissioners that would like to present a question, go ahead and do so now. I don't see anyone at this point, and I don't have any questions. Doug and his team were pretty thorough with our previous meetings with us, so I don't see any at this point, so I'll turn it back to you.
Any other questions, councilors? All right, well, just, I guess, I have one or two. In the cottage clusters, I noticed that there are a 15-foot separation in the common area between them. Is there any change in the distance between the units themselves? On your parking design, it was sort of the north-south look. Is there any change there, or is it still current code?
Sure, so the prevailing standard that's going to apply there is fire code. And so the separation between structures is, I'm not a fire code expert, but I understand there's some variability based on the construction type, right? And so that's why it's not specified in zoning code, because it differs to that. But no changes there. Not interested to override fire code and create risks.
Wouldn't recommend going that route. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rick, this is Doug. So the base would be a minimum 5-foot separation. You could get as close as theoretically, if you were doing your typical detached single family home, it's got to be 5 feet from a property line. So maybe I'll requalify that. 10-foot separation. You could go down to 6, but then you don't have any openings, no windows or anything in that space. And so if you're trying to create livable space, We heard comments from the committee members about having light, being able to get into these units. So typically, you're probably going to see about 10-foot separation between units.
Thank you. And just another question, make sure I get the concept here. So hypothetically, I have a 3,000 square foot R2 lot in Newberg, all right? And I want to build a triplex on this. Now, whether that's actually physically possible, I'm not sure. They may be tiny units, but nonetheless, as long as my understanding then is, yes, I can do that as long as we can meet lot coverage and setback requirements. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. Thank you. Any other questions, folks? All right. I agree with Chair Musil that it was very thorough, and thank you. Thanks so much. And we will wait, I guess, to hear the next iteration of this. And well, we'll hear duplexes tonight later on, but still. So anything else?
The intent, Mayor, is that we will package all of our requirements up to meet state requirements, which I have to have in by June 15th. So we're 8 days away. We will be back in late fall in front of the Planning Commission and the City Council. I'm looking at November and December for hearings on the other middle housing provisions. And again, we may make some tweaks to a few things. I talked with Elizabeth about cottage clusters in institutional zones because we allow housing in institution. It's not the primary use, but I got to figure out how we're going to address that because we're having some inquiries about having cottage clusters in institutional zones. So there'll be more coming back in the fall.
Yeah, and I would just say, similarly in terms of minor tweaks, the state is really working, and cities across the state are working on implementing it for large cities. So Newberg is out in front right now in terms of having gotten this far with the draft code for the other middle housing. And DLCD, which is the state agency that implements this, we have monthly forums. We just had one today, and there were some new issues that came up and clarifications. So as some of the other cities catch up to where Newberg is over the next couple of months, because their deadline isn't until June of 2022 for the large cities, there could be some additional refinements or ideas. One thing, just to think about, plant the seed that we just heard today was about cottage clusters, if there could be ways to integrate attached units. So you might have like a cottage duplex, if you think about that, and could provide some greater efficiencies for the layout. And but trying to figure out what that would mean and what the code would look like, that really hasn't been figured out. So when we come back to this with Doug, we'll really be looking to update those emerging areas of code.
Yeah, that alone is fascinating, because as long as you're not exceeding the minimum footprint or the maximum footprint per unit, yeah, that's fascinating. All right. All right. Anyone else? Any other comments or questions? Doug, when do you think, so November, December, we'll see it. When are you targeting implementation if you had to do the crystal ball?
It's like disco in the 70s. I'm anticipating Planning Commission hearing in November, City Council hearing in December. If we do that, then we should have the regulations in place and operational by the end of January of 2022.
All right, thank you. One thing I'd like to just underscore for whoever may be listening in out in Zoom land, as Elizabeth mentioned, the impact on this is not expected to be incredibly evident, right? 3% increase in housing units is the projection. So I'll just leave it at that. It's not, as she said, not going to be a tidal wave of quadplexes in every zone.
And we've just, and as I've mentioned in a couple of meetings now, we've gone back to our HNA and have revised Chapter 6 to address that 3%, which totals 57 units. But it's come up. And so I chose to go back and revisit that. And so I'll be bringing back that revised HNA to the council for you to re-accept it. And again, all the changes are in that Chapter 6. So again, we're trying to make sure we got all the fabric woven together between our HNA and our middle housing provisions.
Awesome. All right, anything else, folks, for the good of the order? All right, well, thank you, Elizabeth and Heather. Thank you. Thank you so much, Doug. Thank you. And planning commissioners, we don't thank you all often enough. You should be thanked daily. But Chair Musall, and let me read the names of the planning commissioners, whether they're here or not, because of the work that you do, every single month. So Commissioner Jason Dale, Robert Sherry, Chris Wright, Jenna Morris, Sharon Capri, and Charles Abon. And there we are, and Chair Jeff Musall. So thank you all very much. We'll, I think, unless we have anything else to say, we will close this and we will be back for the business session at 7 o'clock. So again, planning commissioners, thank you so much. Elizabeth, Heather, and Doug, thank you. And have a nice evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, staff. And from the Planning Commission, good evening.
There we go. Let's get going then. Good evening, everyone. This is the City Council business sessions for June 7th, 2021. If we could please call the meeting to order. There is also an agenda in Spanish that you can find on the city's website. And now a roll call, please, Sue.
Counselor McBride, I just promoted him, so he was disconnected. So Counselor McBride.
Here.
Counselor Cofield is absent tonight. Counselor Yarnell Holloman.
Here.
Counselor Martinez Plancarte.
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Counselor Bacon.
Here.
Counselor Finley.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, 6 present, 1 absent.
Okay. Thank you very much. The Pledge of Allegiance, please. Give you my flags. There's my flags. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, thank you very much. We've got a full agenda this evening, but I did want to start with some sad news with the passing of a very good friend of the city of Newberg and our community, the passing of Mr. Lon Wall. So I'll read a bit from his obituary. Many of us know him or knew him. The ever-poised and infallible Lonnie Lon Bill Wall passed away on Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. He was 69 years old. Loving husband, father figure, proud grandfather, chaser of trains, Corvair savior, fountain for deep, unforgettable wisdom. Lon is survived by his wife and soulmate, Linda Wall, his mother, Betty Wall, his sons, Dennis and Curtis Cavett, niece, Heather Robbins, his daughter-in-law, Amanda Cavett, his grandchildren, Kyler, Kayla, Brandon, Chasen, and Kit Cavett, as well as his son, Phil Wall. He is also survived by his siblings, Kent, Brent, and Sean Wall. Lon was one of the last great outlaws, never conforming, always himself, strong in his convictions and quiet in his peace with God. More than just a man, Lon was a truth seeker, a light of positivity, a calm kindness, and a true friend. He was a daily example of how to live in your faith, yet not be boastful in your way of thinking. He was also a tremendous volunteer for the city of Newberg. He served for years on the Budget Committee, on the Planning Commission, the Citizens Rate Review Commission, and for downtown improvement. So Lon, we hope you rest in peace, and our thoughts and prayers are with your family. All right, moving on. On item number 4A, we've got a proclamation for Pride Month. And if you will indulge me, I will read the proclamation. Proclamation recognizing June 2021 in honor of LGBTQ Pride Month. Whereas the struggle for dignity and equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning LGBTQ people is reflected in the tireless dedication of advocates and allies who strive to forge a more inclusive society. And whereas President Bill Clinton on June 2nd, 2000 declared June Gay and Lesbian Pride Month to commemorate the June 1969 Stonewall Uprising in Lower Manhattan. And on June 1st, 2009, President Barack Obama expanded the commemoration further by declaring June to be Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. And whereas June 28, 2021 marked the 16th anniversary, or will mark the 16th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, which broke out following a police raid on the Stonewall Inn, targeting LGBTQ patrons and other marginalized people in violation of their civil rights, leading to the birth of the gay rights movement. And whereas LGBTQ Americans, including those who live in our local communities, face discrimination simply for being who they are and for who they love, and there remains much work to do to extend the promise of our country to every person. And whereas the landmark Supreme Court decision of 2015 guaranteeing marriage equality in all 50 states was a historic victory for LGBTQ Americans and continues to affirm our belief that we are all more free when we are treated as equals. And now, therefore, it is proclaimed that on the 7th day of June 2021 by the mayor and city council and on behalf of the citizens of the city of Newberg, Oregon, that we proclaim the month of June 2021 as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning Pride Month, and encourage all community residents to eliminate prejudice wherever it exists and to celebrate our great diversity by taking part in community events throughout June, which will focus on and celebrate our LGBTQ neighbors. All right, well, thank you. And I believe we've got a couple of people on the call that here. I know we've got we've got McMinnville City Councilor Remy Drabkin, I believe, and also Newberg business owner and dedicated volunteer Kristen Stoller is also on the line. So thank you all. Let's see, Councilor Drabkin or Kristen, did you all want to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am pleased to be here with you today, not only as, I'm going to say, council president of the city of McMinnville. I like to throw that in. But really, I'm here today to talk about Wine Country Pride, which is an initiative that it has truly stemmed from our county in the sense that you have small business owners from McMinnville, Newberg, Dundee, and elsewhere that have banded together to bring together a pride celebration that is going on throughout the month of June. We're carrying forward a flag initiative that was started by Pollinate Flowers, where businesses, any business in Yamhill County, can request a free Progress Pride flag to fly for the month of June. And available on our website, winecountrypride.com. We also have a month-long initiative going called Rainbow Quest, which is very similar to the Meltdown, which you'll all be familiar with. And in fact, the fabulous Diane Longacre is running that for us. And $1 back from all drinks and some sweet pies also will be funding Wine Country Pride. We have multiple events happening throughout the month that you can find again on our website. And then Wine Country Pride itself is funding scholarships to every high school in Yamhill County. It's funding an addition of books to both the school district and public libraries that are age-appropriate books that talk about acceptance and love. And our great teaching materials. And we hope next year to be providing art installations for the city of Newberg and the city of McMinnville by queer artists. And then, of course, we're just celebrating and loving one another a lot. So look for your pride flags. Please go to our website, request your pride flags. And even though I'm the one that gets to speak to you today, we're really a big steering committee, and we've pulled in a lot of community leaders to make all of this happen. And we're very proud of it. And thank you for honoring Pride Month. It means a lot. And as a rural queer person, it really means a lot to hear the support of our communities. So thank you.
All right. Well, Council President Drabkin, thank you so much, and thank you to all of your group there, and all the best. So thank you. All right, let's move on our agenda now to the city manager's report. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, is this something that we vote on?
I don't know. Is this typically a
I mean,
proclamation?
I didn't know we could do a proclamation without voting on it. How would we do that?
I'll defer to city attorney on that, Mike.
Okay.
So you can choose to have proclamations on the agenda. Typically, when it comes to a vote, it has to be through one of the three kind of council actions, right? Be it administrative, legislative, or judicial. And so the proclamation isn't it's not an ordinance. It's not a resolution or an order. So proclamations don't require a vote.
Okay, well, I just want to go on record that I'm against this. I'll treat people with respect, but I'm not going to raise one group over another group of people. I think that's discriminatory. So that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, because I think we'll leave it at that. I will tempted to get into a discussion about discrimination, and that's probably not where we want to go with this. So, all right, we good to move on to the city manager's report? No, I can't leave it. I can't leave it. Sorry. I'm sorry. And this may be out of turn, and I apologize. But there are groups in our community, in all communities, that have been significantly mistreated over their lifetimes. And I think that goes to a lot, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it is race, whether it is creed, whether it is religion. It has happened throughout our history. Anyone who denies that, I am sorry. I cannot sit idly by. So I'm sorry, Mike. That's my opinion. You heard some of my opinion this afternoon, so there it is. Okay, sorry about that. My apologies. We'll move on now to the city manager's report. Thank you so much, Dan.
Okay, well, looking at the agenda, I'm going to keep this brief. Just wanted a brief update on COVID, just to reflect which information which I think has been shared already, but I want to make sure that we provide that publicly one more time. We have the option in our facilities of either checking individuals' COVID vaccination status or essentially continuing to require face coverings. And I think given the copious amounts of work that staff have, I think checking or trying to understand how to check COVID vaccination status presents both conflict for them and also a challenge of trying to figure out when to drop things and serve folks who want to come into the city facilities or just presents a lot of issues. So we've chosen to continue to require face coverings for all folks in our facilities, staff and visitors, patrons, and other folks. And just to reinforce that, I just want to share that we did receive a notice from OSHA, Oregon OSHA, regarding our library right around the time that the CDC was making their announcement about face coverings. And while I don't think that it was necessarily an issue that was valid, we did respond and try to provide our a sense of what had been continuing, which is that we were requiring facial coverings, that there's a risk for us as an organization, especially given the public nature of our facilities use. And just want to make sure that folks understand that's one of the reasons that we are continuing to require face coverings, is we are regulated. And during this pandemic, we've been regulated by Oregon OSHA, among others, and we're trying to make sure that we comply to make sure that we minimize the risk to residents, to staff, and really just try to comply with the rules that have been put forward to us. Switching gears, I did have a conversation with the chamber since the last meeting on system development charges, trying to move that forward. My goal is that we'll have a work session discussion in August, hopefully early August, about some of the feedback we're getting. And we're working on putting a survey together for community businesses and members of the community to both a video to sort of explain a little bit about SDCs. I know it is a complicated topic, so trying to provide a little information ahead of asking for opinions, but also are interested in feedback and ideas. And so moving forward to try to bring something back to the council in August. We're also in the final few days before the RFP for our strategic planning consultation facilitation support. before that closes. And I've gotten a couple of actual submissions, but I've gotten a number of we will submit. And so I'm excited to review those when the time comes, and hoping that I might interest a couple of counselors in participating in that review. We'll probably have some staff, some department heads as well. But given that I think it's important that the council is bought in, and also really that you all have as much of a say, given what we've talked about in our budget discussions around policy, and the importance of making some of those policy calls before we get to spending the money. I think it would be helpful to make sure we've got the right person or persons to help us through that conversation. Just a point of, I guess, preparation information. I will be going to the Oregon City County Management Association conference beginning of July for a few days. So just letting you know that it's actually an in-person conference. So it's kind of one of those weird experiences that I think we're trying to figure out how to do that again, but something to look forward to, I guess. I'll wear my mask. And then lastly, the Summer of Sustainability has kicked off. And hopefully if you've been on social media, you've seen some of that campaign out there. That is a campaign started and some of the base materials created by George Fox University students. And so excited about that. Really looking at using that as a launching pad for community conversations around sustainability topics, but also did have a conversation at the end of last week with the Newberg Sustainable Solutions Group about working collaboratively with them on a sustainability plan. And so I'm hopeful that we're able to move that topic forward with more action in the coming fiscal year. So that is it. Please wear your face coverings in our buildings, and we look forward to serving you all. And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Now, Dan, did I hear you are looking for volunteers to review the proposals? Would you like
That would
to?
be great. Yeah, I mean, I think at least a couple counselors, if willing. I plan to get the proposals submitted electronically, and so I can forward those around for email, and we can schedule some meetings maybe. But maybe a couple of folks, and again, we'll probably have department heads review them as well, just because I think the idea was both to have council discussion and implementation discussions with staff using the consultants. So I think both will be very interested parties.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. And I don't know if anybody else wants to sign up now. I just blanked out a few people, actually. Mike, did you have a question?
No, I was just wanting to let you know I would be willing to help.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. All right. So there's Mike and I. Anyone else?
Me, Denise.
Denise. Okay. All right. All right. For some reason, I'm seeing your pictures and then they're going away. So I don't know if that's me or what that is, but okay. Anything else, Dan? Any other questions for Dan, folks?
Thank you.
We were getting queued for the public comments, which is next on our agenda. All right. So for those slated to speak, we typically allow 5 minutes as is the timer currently on the screen. And I think the first that I've got here, we did receive public comment, written comment as well from Scott Johnson. So
Yes.
Mr. Johnson, if you are there, we would love to hear from you.
He should be on the screen. I did promote him.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Mr. Johnson, are you there? Scott? I see you, but you may still be muted.
Dan, can you unmute him? Because I can't do that while I'm running the timer at the same time.
Giving it a shot here. I think you may have to unmute yourself.
There he goes.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
There we go.
Yes.
Good evening. Yes,
Hi,
we can.
Mayor, can you
Hello.
hear us?
Yes, we can. Scott
You-
and Leonard, good evening. Good to see you. Well, I cannot hear a thing. I don't know if anybody else can.
I think they're frozen.
Okay, yeah, okay, but you can hear me anyway, Denise, huh?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right, let's see what's happening. Mike, can you
Yeah,
hear
glad to
us?
see you too.
There we go.
As we spoke a couple weeks ago about our problem with a building that we have behind our. Hello, Dan. Hello.
I think you're coming in and out. I'm not sure why.
Maybe shut off the video
Yeah, maybe just
or call in.
yeah. Yeah, we seem to be having trouble here, so our apologies, but I think it's on you. There we go. Let's try that. Can we unmute them again, Dan?
Trying. I've only got the ability to ask them to unmute.
Oh, gotcha.
Hello.
There we
There we
go. Now you're muted again. Sorry. There.
Okay, not very good.
Okay, sounds good.
Electronics, so I can't understand.
Let me get him on the phone here. This is.
We're going to try something else, Mayor.
Okay,
Hello?
there we go.
Can you hear us?
We can.
Okay. As I said before, my name is Leonard Johnson and my son Scott's here. We own a business in downtown Newberg called Johnson's Furniture. We also own a lot behind our store that we've always used since we bought it my parents bought it in 1955. We bought it for two reasons. One reason to have access to 2nd Street, and the other is to have a small storage facility for incoming freight and a small storage facility. Our old building is getting to a point where it's it needs to be replaced. And I've been checking with city people. First of all, I contacted you, Mayor, and you came down to the store and you've seen what kind of a situation we have. We have trucks come in there, not necessarily our trucks, but trucks coming for NAS and for us. We need to keep that lot as open as possible, but we do need a storage facility on it. And our old storage facility is to a point of non-return. They bought the city building inspector said that we could put new siding on it, but it's completely, and we could put a new roof on it, but for our use, it just isn't equitable anymore. I mean, it needs to be replaced. And we're not asking for hardly much more than what we've already got, but that's why we're asking the city to help us to get a new facility put on that, be able to put a new facility on that property without going through vacating alleyways and what were some of the other things that were needing to be done. And I don't think the city of Newberg would vacate an alleyway that has a main sewer line that's got a manhole right at the end of the alleyway, right in the back of our store. There's a manhole to take care of the new sewer line that they put in there 25 years ago when NAPS was built. And when we removed the old house from that property, we were under the impression that we could keep the garage or the storage area that we have, and we could, if we needed to replace it, we could replace it. That was a city council when the Bauer brothers were building the store. The people that it would impact is NAPS and the Quonset Hut, which is owned by Mark Case. And both of them are saying that that's what they would like to see us do, is to just be able to build a new building there without you know, trying to do other measures to have storage on our property. And anyway, I have some pictures to show. Did you get to see some of those pictures, the city council that we submitted? You know, you
Yep.
can see that the building is in really bad. I mean, putting a new roof on it and putting new siding on it, I feel like it's like putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, it's gonna make it look more beautiful, but as far as what it's gonna actually do, it won't help us out at all. So we're just asking the city council to maybe help us out in allowing us to build a new building there. Anyway, what else would I like to say? It's just, you know, we need to keep it as open as much as possible. We like to, you know, we have to have places for our trucks, but we have incoming trucks today that are 53-foot trailers, and, you know, I mean, they're big. I mean, so we can't take up a lot more of the space than what we're already currently using, to keep them, so we can get these trucks off of 2nd Street so we can unload those trucks without paying demurrage on keeping the truck. We have so many minutes or to get those trucks unloaded. So, you know, we're between a rock and a hard spot. City support, if we can get so. We've tried. I don't know even what to do. I mean, honestly, I don't know we've got a letter from one of them's type 1 and type 2, and what we can do and this and that. I don't understand any of that stuff. I just would like to know if I can put a new building up there. I guess my time's up. Anyway.
Did you?
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Leonard or Scott,
think
did you
my
have
time's
anything
up,
else to add?
Excuse me?
Yeah. Did you have anything else to add? The 5 minutes is up, but did you have anything else?
I know my 5 minutes is up, and I think I tried to get through it as quick as I could. And anyway, I just would like to have the city council support and letting us put up a new building. I see that, you know, it looks like to me that other people get things put up in the city, and I'm not asking for much more than what I've got, but I need to have it replaced. The other problem with the old building is only half of it has a foundation under it. The other is on blocks, and they're just sitting there. I mean, so I mean, that's why I don't want to spend a lot of money into my old facility. I just, you know, so.
It's either that or put 53-foot.
We can put cargo trailers on there, I guess.
And what I've noticed lately is you know, in the downtown area, a lot of transients, and they'll get back behind our store, and there's some issues back there, and I think putting a new you know, guarded facility back there would help with the homeless issue that we do see behind our store in that area.
And the other thing I'd like to bring up, several years ago, we used to keep a dumpster in our alleyway, a cardboard container, because we get a fair amount of cardboard. We get a lot of cardboard. And one day, somebody lit that cardboard. We don't do that anymore, but they lit the cardboard container on fire, and it got into the roof of our building. And Al Blodgett came down, and he said, without the of that lot left open, if they would have had to fight that from the alleyway, there was no way that they would have got that fire put out. So we want to leave it open, but we do need a facility on it.
Okay. All right. Well, I know, you know, Leonard and Scott, I know you've been in touch with the city, particularly the community development director and Doug Rux. Let's continue the conversation.
I've talked to 3 different people. I've talked to a guy named Keith Leonard, and I've talked to a guy named Ruck, and I've talked, and another guy, and I don't have his name, but he's the guy that worries about water runoffs and sewer. I mean, if it, and he said, he said your facility's already prepared. I would make you do anything. It's already got the facility in there for to take water to standing water off of it, and it goes into the sewer, or it goes into the storm sewer drains. And he said your land's, I mean, that lot is already what I would need, he said, is already in. And he said, you know, no, I wouldn't have any problem you building a new building on there. So,
All right, well, let's, why don't we do this? We'll have staff again reach out to you to try to figure out some kind of a solution to this that also takes into consideration code. If that's okay with you all.
well,
we'll
looks like to me that
continue.
if you won't bend the rules on the code a little bit, we won't be able to put a new building on, because this, you know, he said we
right.
could put it, if we went through the process, we could maybe put a showroom on that property. I don't want a showroom on that property. What else did he? Oh, we could put an office building on there, or we could put a medical building on there. But even if we did that, we couldn't use it for storage. I mean, we need a storage building, and we need it now.
Okay. All right.
We're gonna have to make.
Right. We have to be, you know, again, we need to go through staff in order to know what we could even look at waiving in order to accommodate this. So let's try to find a solution that is as workable, the most workable for you all and for the city. And I know Doug has spoken to you a couple of times and laid out options. But if we can plan to do that and then get back on this, you know, fairly quickly, you know,
Mayor, we got to do something. We need to do something this summer somehow, if we can. If there's any possible way we could get it done this summer, that's
Okay.
what we need to do, because the old building is just, it's in very, very bad shape.
Okay. All right. Well, great. We will be back in touch, and we'll try to find, I'll speak for myself, not for the whole council. We'll try to find some kind of a solution. I'm sure everyone would be agreeable to that, to something that can work for all involved.
I would really appreciate that. We're not looking for a fight. We're just looking for a solution.
Great. All right, Leonard and Scott, thank you. Thank you so very much. And we'll be back in touch. Have a nice evening.
You too. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, next on the, let's see, on public comments, Mr. Mark Grier. Has he been promoted, Sue? There he is. Good evening, Mr. Grier. Can you hear me? Mr. Grier, we are ready when you are. If you'd like to unmute. There we go.
Yes, sir. I can't, for some reason, I don't see a video. My camera isn't on, but I'll go ahead and use the video portion of it. That's fine.
Okay, great.
Some years back, 2 or 3 years back, perhaps 2018, 2019, the city instituted a under $5 street maintenance fee added to the utility bill. And you guys started off with a bang. You got a lot of street improvement projects going, a lot of things happened. But last year and this year, not so much. So I contacted the city, sent them an email and asked them what was up. And your engineer, Paul Chui, C-H-I-U, basically, yes, he said he was going to update the city website with what was going on this year and put a list of street maintenance projects up for bid and stuff that was projected to happen this year. And that's great. I realize there's an awful lot of back maintenance. Things move at a glacial pace and it costs a lot of money. But I looked at this list and I didn't see anything on here about River Street or South College. Why do I care? Well, as everybody's aware, the mill site is finally being developed. Lots of potential new customers and residents down there. Someone is building 124 new homes north of the bypass, just west of the mill site. There's a brand new apartment complex going in on the west end of River Street, immediately north of the bypass. And that's not the end of all the development going on down there. Now, all these folks, if they want to go to Portland, they want to go to Salem, they want to go to Mac, they can drive north on River, east on 11th, and then get out to Wisniewski and go to the bypass, go to Point South and east. But the downtown core, access to the downtown core has largely been ignored. Now, I'm sure some of the folks downtown would love to see some of these new customers coming into their business establishments. I'm kind of surprised that Newberg, when they first announced that the mill site was sold or even shut down, why didn't somebody jump on it and start developing either South College or River Street as a through street? There's neither one of those streets, nothing's been done to them in years, if not decades. South College, if you look at it carefully, it's misaligned, it's in terrible shape. It's constricted up near 9th Street. River Street is rough of different widths. It's overhung by oak trees. Now, is there any plan in the future of the city to develop either one of those streets as a through street? And if not, why not?
All right. Well, thank you for your comments. Did you have any other comments that you'd like to make?
No, I just want to know why nothing's been done on those streets, or is anything going to be done?
Right. Well, normally for public comment, we don't go back and forth too much, but I can tell you that, and other staff can ring in here, but that area is the part of the urban renewal district that we are currently working towards. In fact, there will be a hearing on it this evening after our regular business session. And so that is particularly River Street and Blaine in particular. But what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is to have staff reach out to you directly and to try to get some of your questions answered, if that would work for you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you very much for your time this evening. And thank you for bringing this to our attention. And we will connect you with staff here in the very near future.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Grier.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. So as we talked with Dan earlier today, those comments we'll put back onto issue tracker, and we'll follow up with both Johnson Furniture and with Mr. Grier here in the near future. All right. Next item on our agenda is the consent calendar, items 7, A, B, C, and D. As I've done in the past, I mentioned that one of these, I've had, because of my job with Habitat for Humanity, we have had in the past involvement with the Saunders Company. And so just to make that known, but other than that, I will entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Thank you, President Finley.
Second.
And a second from Elise. All in favor signify by raising your left hands or saying aye. 1, 2, 3. I'm freezing a little bit. So how's about voice vote? So just like, okay, I got Jules, me, Elise, Stephanie, and Mike. Yeah, they both look frozen to me at the moment.
Oh, and me, I'm
And
here
Denise,
too.
There's Denise. How did I forget? And there's Denise. So I think we got it. All right. Did you get that, Sue?
Yes, sorry. I was
Thank
swallowing water. Sorry about
Thank
that.
you. We've got some technological challenges this evening. All right, now let's move on to public hearings. This is item, where did it go? This is item 8A. All right, now this one is an administrative public hearing. Resolution 2021-3733 and 2021-3734, public hearing and approval for state revenue sharing for 2021-22. So this hearing is now called to order. Declaration of conflicts of interest or abstentions, anyone? Hearing none. The staff report, Kezia.
Good evening, council and public and staff. Tonight, I am presenting on Resolution 2021-3733 and 2021-3734. The City of Newberg relies upon state shared revenues to provide vital service to its residents. We are required to meet certain obligations to participate in this program. To receive the state shared revenue funds, the city must hold public hearings before the Budget Committee and City Council to discuss the possible uses of these revenues. And this year, the hearing was held on April 27th, 2021. The Budget Committee approved staff's recommendation for use of these state revenues. The resolution tonight is the second step of the state mandated process to provide the public with the opportunity to comment on the proposed uses of the state shared revenues. The 2021 proposed budget, as well as the 2021 approved budget, reports anticipated state shared revenues in the general fund, the street fund, and the 911 fund, with the state shared revenues being used to support services provided by those funds. Specifically, the general fund budget in fiscal year 21-22 will receive $868,000 in liquor, cigarette, and marijuana state shared revenues. The street fund will receive $1.94 million in restricted use gas tax revenues. And the 911 communications fund will receive $275,000 in restricted use state shared revenues. To receive state shared revenues, the city must certify that it provides at least 4 of the requisite municipal services, including fire, police, street construction maintenance, sewers, planning and zoning, and utility services. City staff will complete the certification process with the State Department of Administrative Services before July 31st to receive state shared revenues. And with that, I complete my staff report. Rob Moody of Marina and Company has served as our temporary contract finance manager, and he was instrumental in developing our fiscal year 21-22 budget. And he is available tonight if you have any questions about state shared revenues as well.
Thank you, Rob. All right, any public testimony, Sue?
Mr. Mayor, I did not receive any public testimony on these items.
We will close public testimony. All right, the recommendation from staff.
Staff
Because do we need to do these separately, or can they go together?
The 3733 and 3734, they can go together. And staff recommendation is that council adopts resolutions 2021-3733 and 2021-3734.
Thank you. Deliberation Council, any comments, questions? Okay, Mike.
Has the revenue sharing, has that dropped any at all? Like, for example, the marijuana tax, are we getting what we kind of thought we would? Or is it less than what we thought? Or how has it overall been the last couple of years?
Mr. Mayor, if I can answer Mike's question.
Please do.
I'm not sure what the city's initial kind of projections were for the marijuana tax. The state marijuana tax appears to be kind of on a statewide basis dropping off a little bit. Liquor taxes, amazingly during the pandemic seem to have increased. And we'll see some additional revenue probably beyond what initial state projections were in that area. The state revenue sharing and the cigarette taxes continue to decline.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments, folks? All right, hearing none, how's about a motion for both of these resolutions?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt resolutions number 2021-3733 and number 2021-3734.
Second.
I got a second from Mike. All right. How would you like this? You want a voice vote, Sue, or can we do this without the voice vote?
Yeah, I think you can do it without the voice vote unless it's going to dissent.
Okay. All in favor signify by raising your left hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. We got them all. There we go. All right. Thank you, folks. All right. Next public hearing, also an administrative public hearing. This is Resolution 2021-3735, adoption of the budget. Here we go. And Kezia, I think that is you again.
Thank you again, Kezia Warner, Assistant City Manager. And tonight we present the approved budget for council to adopt in the culmination of the fiscal year 21-22 budget process. We held 4 budget committee meetings in which the committee was presented with and ultimately approved the proposed budget. The budget committee deliberations and their input drafting the approved budget produced a sound financial plan that addresses community and council priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. This resolution tonight accomplishes multiple things. It adopts the budget in its entirety and makes legal appropriations which set and restrict the spending per category. Tonight, you're voting on the approved budget with all fund expenditures totaling $133,844,625 and 141.4 total FTE. The resolution also imposes the property tax rate and categorizes the property tax for all taxable property within the district. And the property tax approved by the Budget Committee and now before you for approval is $2.73.19 per 1,000 of assessed value. And I would be remiss in not recognizing the challenging environment that we faced while creating this year's budget. We experienced vacancies in key positions on our finance team, and Dan Coiler, acting as interim finance manager, was a guiding force to ensure that we didn't miss any deadlines or critical pieces of the process. Additionally, Rob Moody was hired on contract specifically to help us develop and deliver the budget, in addition to complete an organizational assessment and our procurement policy. Without Dan and Rob, producing this budget would have been next to impossible. That's my staff report, and I will turn it over to City Manager Dan Weinheimer for a few brief comments on the budget.
And I will keep it brief, but I do want to say thank you to Kezia, who politely did not thank herself in this process, but has carried a significant amount of the work throughout. And I think without her leadership, we would not be here with a completed process, I think, given the vacancies that we had. So I want to say thank you and appreciate her work on this, along with Rob and Dan Coiler and all the input from department heads, and wanted to not just recognize the council, but I'll take a page from the mayor and recognize the volunteers who make up the remainder of the budget committee. So Solomon Allen, Timothy Carpenter, Beth Koshman, Lizelle Mathai, Greg Minahan, our intrepid chair, Molly Olson, and Brad Sitton. And just want to say thank you. I know that taking that extra time is challenging, and municipal budgeting is not for the faint of heart. It can be complex and it's sometimes convoluted, and I appreciate the efforts of staff and the budget committee to kind of wade through that. I think we've got a solid spending plan. I won't belabor all the details of it, since that is already in the budget itself, but also we will just want to say that we will be pushing out additional information as we go forward. One of the pushes, and I want to thank the team that helped manage the budget process, but one of the efforts was to really try to emphasize public information, starting with an orientation that Professor Moody provided us, but also an opportunity to post some of that information for the public to consume and hopefully start to demystify some of the budgeting process. And, one of the things we will be pushing out is some infographics and things like that, some summarization of the details of the budget to try to, again, make it more accessible for the community. And, we'll continue to work at ways that we can make it even more consumable and understandable in the future. So again, just want to say thanks to Kezia and Rob and everyone else, and just leave it at that.
All right, well, thank you. Do we have any public testimony, Sue?
Mr. Mayor, we do not have any public testimony for this item.
Okay, thank you. I'll close public testimony then, and a recommendation from staff.
Staff recommendation is to approve resolution 2021-3735, adopting the 21-22 budget making appropriations, and imposing and categorizing the tax.
Thank you. Time for council deliberation. Comments or questions, folks? No, hearing none. One thing I do want to say, just as again, I think this is in the works right now, but one of the things that I think are one of our counselors, I believe it was Councilor Yarnell Holloman, mentioned that the budget process is not necessarily the best way to try to make policy decisions. So one of the things that I believe is in the works now, and Dan mentioned it earlier during his city manager's report, is to try to do a session where we really talk about what the priorities are, and to try to really focus the budget to that. I know Dan has also talked about sort of program or project-based budgets, again, which might be a way to better align the goals and actions. So anyway, wanted to mention that in the context of this. All right. Any other deliberation, folks? Any other comments? Okay, in that case, we are looking for a motion then.
I will make a motion. I never make a motion. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I recommend that we approve resolution 2021-3735, adopting the 2021-22 budget, making appropriations and imposing and categorizing the tax.
Okay.
Second.
Second from Jules. All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor signify by raising your left hands. All right, opposed, same sign. Okay, and one opposed. All right. All right, well, thank you. That does pass. Now we're to the point where if it wasn't exciting passing the budget, the next thing is particularly exciting for those who like public hearings, because this is a rare bird we've got here coming up, folks. This is not only a legislative hearing, but this is also a quasi-judicial land use public hearing. Hold on to your hats. That's pretty wild. So here we go. I'm running right to my cheat sheets on this one. Here I go. All right, a legislative and a quasi-judicial hearing. So we are now opening the legislative hearing. Where's my note? Where is it? Here it is. Ordinance 2021-2880, middle housing ordinance. We mentioned this earlier. This is about duplexes. Okay, declaration of conflicts of interest or abstentions, anyone? I will just say, upon potential conflict of interest in that Habitat for Humanity does occasionally build duplexes. So there you are. We'll also now open the quasi-judicial hearing for the Newberg specific plan, Northwest Newberg specific plan, Springbrook Oaks specific plan, and Springbrook master plan duplex amendments. Call for abstentions, bias, ex parte contact, and objections to jurisdiction. Again, as mentioned earlier, my day job with Habitat for Humanity and duplexes. All right, I think we're on to the point, if I'm following my script correctly, that it is time for city attorney legal announcements. Good evening, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much appreciated. Certain announcements are required before the commencement of a quasi-judicial land use hearing. This hearing deals with the adoption of amendments to the Newberg Comprehensive Plan, Newberg Municipal Code, Northwest Newberg Specific Plan, Springbrook Oaks Specific Plan, and Springbrook Master Plan, all related to duplex regulations. The announcement required by the Oregon Revised Statutes, ORS 197.763, is as follows. 1. The applicable substantive criteria for the decision are listed in the staff report under Exhibit F to Ordinance number 2021-2880, which begins on page 62 of the Request for Council Action packet attached to the council agenda. 2, testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the criteria described above or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation that you believe applies to this decision. 3, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. And 4, failure to raise a constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The applicant, who has the burden of proof, may have at least 7 days after the record is closed to submit final written argument. At the close of the testimony portion of the hearing, the applicant will have to decide if the applicant wishes to submit further written argument. State law also provides the following definitions under ORS 197.763. Argument means assertions and analysis regarding the satisfaction or violation of legal standards or policy believed relevant by the proponent to a decision. Argument does not include facts. And evidence means facts, documents, data, or other information offered to demonstrate compliance or non-compliance with the standards believed by the proponent to be relevant to the decision. Any submission by the applicant must be limited to argument. No additional evidence can be submitted. If the applicant wishes to make final written argument, no further deliberation shall take place tonight. If the applicant waives that right, the council may proceed with deliberation. And that ends the city attorney pre-hearing announcements, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, James. All right, the staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So we have with us this evening Heather Austin from 3J Planning. They are prime consultant on working on the duplex regulations. I will begin by entering the entire staff report, its exhibits and attachments into the record. I'm going to now turn it over to Heather. She's going to walk through a PowerPoint summarizing the components that are in the multitudes of pages. There were 52 different sections of the development code that needed to be amended to comply with the administrative rule and the state law. In addition, we had to make amendments to the Northwest Newberg specific plan, Springbrook Oaks specific plan, and the Springbrook master plan. So Heather.
Thank you, Doug. I'm going to just share my screen. We have a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening. Make this full screen. All right. This showing up for everybody all right? Okay, great. Tonight we're here to talk about the duplex portion of Middle Housing Code. I know you heard earlier from Elizabeth about the other middle housing sections, and she referenced several times that we had to include the assumption that we would be adopting this duplex code so that we could move forward with the middle housing and use this as our basis. So our project objective in starting the duplex portion of the Middle Housing Code was to really expand the development opportunities to address Newberg's housing shortage as identified in the 2019 Housing Needs Analysis, and then of course comply with HB 2001, which does regulate those types of housing. So tonight we're here to talk about duplexes, and you spoke earlier about the other middle housing types, and you'll continue to do so through the fall of this year. So the way we started this project was to audit the existing code. We wanted to know what's in there now, what complies with the middle housing requirements, what can we use, and what can we build on, and then what do we need to sort of tweak or get rid of altogether. So we looked at that and began our assessment there. And really the crux of this duplex portion of middle housing is, where do we permit single family detached dwellings and under which regulations? And wherever we do that and however we do that, that's how we do duplexes. So we're really proving that parity between those two housing types. And as I mentioned, we'll be doing the other middle housing types, which is a little different, coming up this fall. So project engagement was of course unusual during the time of COVID, but we did manage to have quite a robust citizen advisory committee group. They met 6 times virtually. We had 2 public open houses and 2 online surveys that had really great response rates. We had over 100 responses to each of those surveys. So that's really a great response rate for something going on at this time of life. I can tell you from working in a lot of different jurisdictions. Some common themes we heard were that, yes, this is a great idea. We do need more housing options and we need some more affordable housing options. But we heard a little concern about things like parking and maybe the massing and scale of larger units and attached type units. So this project, as Doug mentioned, does include comprehensive plan amendment development code amendments and specific and master plan amendments. So I'll first mention the comprehensive plan amendments that are before you this evening. The housing policies that are in your comprehensive plan need to be updated to allow duplexes on any lots where single family detached dwellings are permitted outright. And then also a minor clarification to net density calculations. And this is just cleaning up duplicate language that was existing in the housing policy amendments. So here is the bulk of the work, the development code amendments. I know much of your packet centered on the double underline, here's what we're changing. So really, this is a lot of information here, and I'm going to break these out individually, so don't worry too much about all the information on this slide. But it's just to say that, again, the purpose is to provide that parity between where we allow duplexes and where we allow single-family detached homes, and how we review them, what type of land use review they're each subject to, and design standards, if any. So we started with definitions because we're always told definitions are a great place to start when you're looking at updating code. And we talked about how we can provide options for duplexes on properties. And the advisory committee came up with the conclusion, as well as we heard from the survey results, that any configuration of duplex on a lot can make sense, and it can be a reasonable way to develop depending on lot size and configuration. So we did end up changing the definition to include all of the different configurations, including attached and detached duplexes. Allowing duplexes in all of the applicable zoning districts was easy because they were already permitted. So no change was needed there. Newberg was ahead of the curve and already saying, yep, you can build these duplexes. But there were certain circumstances where perhaps a type 2 site design was required for a duplex. So the code changes do bring that back into parity with that single family and just say that plot plan review, type 1 type review is all that's required for duplexes as well. Where does this apply? And in Newberg, as you can see, everything that's in yellow is pretty much residential zoning. So everywhere, it's spread throughout the city, all the residential zones and the master plans and specific area plans. So really we're talking about, throughout the city, there's not geographically specific areas, but it's really spread throughout the city. Minimum lot size came into play because the current code does regulate minimum lot size on the number of units on the lot. So to be able to permit that duplex on the same size lot as a single family dwelling, we did need to recommend some changes to that. So at the bottom line, there's the existing code before any hearings this evening. And that does require that if you're going to have a duplex in R1, you'd need 10,000 square feet. So what we're saying is for a duplex, same as a single family detached, it'd be 5,000. And that applies across the board in all of the zones to basically remove that requirement of lot size per dwelling unit and change it to just lot size for any type of development. And you'll see there that the R3 zone was currently at 3,000 for a duplex. And we are recommending that 2,500 square foot minimum. And that's because that R3 zone really is that higher density zoning district. So we wanted to make sure we're providing the opportunities to build those higher density type products in that R3 zoning district while preserving the larger lots in the R1 and the mid-size in the R2. Density targets are really interesting in Newberg and a little different, although we do see that other places, and that they're not maximums, they're the target. And as I think Doug mentioned earlier this evening, or perhaps Elizabeth, we're really looking at possibly a 3% change with middle housing being included in the calculations. So we don't see a need to change the density targets at this time. If for some reason, after you've finished all your middle housing updates and they've been in place for a while and you really do see like it's really 4 or 5% or something different, then the city may want to revisit those density targets in the long term and decide what to do with that. But as for now, in order to provide these opportunities for middle housing and to satisfy the requirements of HB 2001, we're not recommending any changes to the density targets at this time. Let's see. So really we're basing it on lot size instead of density at this point. And this is the same idea here, that there's not a lot of change needed to the dimensional standards, except so we really talked with the advisory committee quite a bit about leaving the R1 zone in that lower density development, 60% lot coverage, let's see, 30-foot height maximum, but then really looking at the R2, RP, and AR zones as the places that we can increase the maximum lot coverage and the maximum height to allow these duplex type developments that maybe are a bit larger in size than a single family development. And then no changes needed to the R3 zoning district to higher because it's already at 70% maximum lot coverage and 45-foot height maximum. So parking is always, it was the #1 response that we received from the survey, and it was a large topic of conversation for the advisory committee. We don't have the ability of requiring more than 1 space per unit. So we really are at that 2 spaces per duplex standard. That's the minimum parking that we can require. But we can start looking at how we require that parking so that it can make sense and provide those on-street parking standards. So we did work with the city engineer to make sure that these would be in concert with those public works standards and engineering design standards, to maybe talk about reducing the minimum driveway spacing from 40 feet down to 22 so that you can still fit a vehicle, but perhaps have those 2 driveways on a property. And then reducing the minimum driveway width from 12 feet, which it is now, down to 10 feet to really allow the space to do 2 driveways if possible. And so those are both, the point of that is to keep those options for on-street parking as much as possible. And here you have 2 scenarios for driveway. On the left, you have the shared 2 driveways, but they're shared. They access the street in 1 spot. And on the right, you have separate driveways, but a space for a vehicle in between. So these are just some fine tuning points that are in addition to those other standards that we discussed. One thing that comes up a lot when talking about middle housing is, how do ADUs, accessory dwelling units, factor in? Can I have a duplex and then still have the accessory dwelling unit? And that's a place where a city can decide. Do you want to allow a duplex and then in addition an ADU, or do you want to just limit it? And so in this case, what the decision has been is to limit it to 1 per. Duplexes are going to be permitted in the same conditions in the stream corridor zone. In the non-conforming single family homes can be converted over to duplexes, and then non-conforming lots of record, if you can do single family detached, you can also do duplex. As Doug mentioned, the master plans are all needing to be updated as well. There are several slides here, but they all have the same ideas in common, that we are looking to update each of these master plans to make sure that the code that implements them, as well as the language in the master plans, provides the opportunity to do duplex development on those single family, same lots that permit single family detached development. So we did propose changes to the Northwest Newberg specific plan, to the Springbrook Oaks plan, to the airport plan, which this, I'll note, almost all of this area is developed out. So we don't see a lot of potential for changes here, but to be completely in compliance with HB 2000 when we did make this change. As well as Springbrook master plan, and then Riverfront. And there is one difference in Riverfront in that currently there are design standards to single family detached homes. So we do apply those to the duplex. So if you already do require certain design standards, or you want to of your single family detached homes, you can apply those to duplex as well. So we, again, we're looking for that parity. So we went ahead and applied them to duplexes as well. And that brings us to our findings and recommendation this evening. The findings that are in your staff report address all of the required provisions of the statewide planning goals, the Newberg Comprehensive Plan, the Chapter 660 of, OAR Chapter 660, Division 46, which is the portion that HB 2001 inserted into the OARs, as well as these applicable sections of the Newberg Municipal Code. The Middle Housing Citizen Advisory Committee did make a recommendation to the Planning Commission to approve this code as proposed. In turn, the Planning Commission and the Affordable Housing Commission recommend that the City Council adopt the changes that are proposed before you this evening. The city has received comments from these groups and organizations as well as individuals regarding this application. And I'll just point out the very bottom one that DLCD, the state, has reviewed and provided comments that we've incorporated into these findings. And with that, I will put forward the recommendation that the City Council adopt these amendments before you to the comprehensive plan, the development code, the specific plans, and the master plans. And that leaves us at any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, folks, first, before we get to questions, let's see if aside from the listed comments, did we receive any other public comments, Sue?
No, Mr. Mayor, I did have a chat exchange and I took it offline with some people who had just moved to town and they didn't understand our processes.
Okay.
So they were fine with just listening because I just wanted to make sure they understood it's a code amendment. We're not running out to build duplexes tomorrow.
Correct.
So
okay, well, good. And
Mr. Mayor, Sue, we did get the one comment that came in on June 3rd from Linda Hansen.
And it was published Friday in the supplemental packet.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we were clear that
which the council has seen.
Okay, and thank you to all who did comment, Ms. Hansen and the folks that just moved to town. Welcome to Newberg, folks, since you were listening in, and hopefully we'll see you and hear you at other meetings in the future. All right, so hearing no other, I will close public comments. Now, do we have any other public agency letters or comments besides those that were already listed?
Mr. Mayor, I might suggest if we could back up before we close. We need to make sure that we have, if there are any comments from any proponents, any opponents, or anybody who's undecided before we can close the public testimony.
Okay. Do we have anyone online, Sue, that might be any of those categories?
No, sir.
Okay. Hearing none, I will now close public testimony. All right. What about public agencies, letters, or comments beyond those already listed?
Mr.
None.
Mayor, I have received none for this item.
Okay, and again, then that is closed for that portion. Now we're ready for city attorney legal announcements for the quasi judicial portion of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'll ask if the applicant will waive the 7-day timeline to submit a final written argument. I'll direct that at Mr. Rux.
Staff waives.
Thank you, Mr. Rux. And post-hearing announcements. If the decision is not made tonight and continued to another date, the record could be reopened at that later date by motion of the council. Therefore, do not assume no further evidence will be taken. If the decision is made tonight, the council has the authority to reconsider the decision following proper procedure. This motion to reconsider is usually required to be made at the next meeting of the city council. The fact that the council could reconsider their decision does not affect the length of time for appeal of that decision. That concludes the post-hearing announcements, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, well, thank you. We have seen the staff recommendation. Any deliberation, folks? All right, we're ready to move into the action by council. Remember, we would like to see if we suggest the waiving of the second reading would be one of the component parts of this. So if we could start with that, that would be great.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we waive the second reading.
Second.
And a second from Jules. All right, all in favor?
That was Denise.
That was, I guess. Sorry.
I should have introduced myself.
My apologies. All right. All in favor of waiving the second reading, please signify by raising your left hands. I think we can still do that. It looks like we all are there. Good. So that passes. All right. And now we are looking for one. And remember, this is by title only, if we can have it. And this will require a roll call vote.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2021-2880, read by title only.
And a second?
Second.
Mike with a second. All right. Any further discussion? All right, a roll call vote, please, Sue.
Let the record show. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm gonna hop in and read the title for the council
Darn it.
approval. Oh, we're there. We're there.
Dang it.
So for the council approval, ordinance number 2021-2880, an ordinance amending the Newberg Comprehensive Plan, Newberg Municipal Code, Title 15 Development Code, sections 15.05.030, 15.100.020, 15.205.050, 15.205.060, 15.220.020, 15.235.040, 15.235.050, 15.240.020, 15.302.032, 15.302.040, 15.303.200, 15.305.020, 15.336.010, 15.336.020, 15.340.020, 15.342.050, 15.342.070, 15.342.100, 15.346.070, 15.352.050, 15.405.010, 15.405.030, 15.405.040, 15.410.070, 15.415.020, 15.420.010, 15.420.020, 15.440.020, 15.440.060, 15.440.075, 15.505.030, the Northwest Newberg Specific Plan, Springbrook Oaks Specific Plan, and Springbrook Master Plan related to duplex regulations.
That was awesome. I tell you what, I'm glad that was only title only. Could you imagine? Thank you. James, thank you very kindly. All right. Are we now ready for a roll call vote? Let's do it.
Councillor McBride,
Yes.
Councillor Cofield is absent. Councillor Yarnell Holloman,
Yes.
Councillor Martinez Plancarte,
Yes.
Mayor Rogers,
Yes.
Councillor Bacon,
Yes.
Councillor Finley,
Yes.
Mayor 6-0-1 absent.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much. Heather and Doug, thank you very kindly for all the work on this. And we'll be seeing you again, I'm sure. So also did want to, thanks to the city recorder for sending along the names of the folks that were on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Again, thank you to them. Robert Moxley, Gabriel Skulek, Melissa Daly, Robert Bonner, Leslie Murray, Irma Vera, and Dominic Seymour. So thank you all very much for that as well. All right, we are now moving on to new business. This is item 9A on your agenda, Resolution 2021-3741, the Dundee Police Contract. And I believe we have Chief Kosmicki. There he is. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. Hello, Mayor, City Council, Dan Weinheimer, and Kezia Warner. So I'm going to give a little bit of history, not much, but just a little bit. In 2004, the City of Dundee and the City of Newberg entered into an IGA for Newberg to provide dispatch services for their police and fire departments at the time. In 2005, the cities of Dundee and Newberg entered into another IGA for police services to be provided by the City of Newberg. In August of 2007, the IGA was amended to include issuing dog licenses for Dundee residents. And we received like $5 from each license and sent the remainder to Dundee. In 2009, the Police Services IGA was renewed and began on July 1st, 2010 and went to 2015. And we've been currently providing, as you know, police services, hence the name Newberg Dundee Police. This request for action, council action consolidates and replaces the 2009 IGA for police services, the 2007 amendment for animal licensing, and the 2004 IGA for emergency communications. IGA 2021-3741 combines the contractual amounts owed for services in amendments in 2004 and 2009. That dollar amount for the 2021 and 22 budget is $508,018. The cost elevator for this IGA will increase by the cost of living adjustment in the Newberg Dundee Public Safety Labor Agreement with the City of Newberg. The city will also retain the 911 tax revenue from Dundee, as well as the licensing fees collected for the dogs. The changes on this IGA were made to read more like a contract for services rather than when we absorbed Dundee, which had how we were going to absorb their personnel rights through Oregon revised statutes, transfer of equipment, all that stuff was taken out. So the document you have in front of you is much more like a contract for services. And I don't think you want me to go into all the property and equipment that we no longer use and is antiquated and outdated. That would just make this process longer. And I can never follow up with what James just did. Thanks, Sue, for letting me follow James.
All right. Any questions for the chief, folks? All right. Hearing none. All right. Here we go. So it's time, I guess, for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 2021-3741.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Elise with a second. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your left hands. I don't see Mike. I think we might have lost Mike. So, but I still think you got 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 5 votes.
Okay.
Okay. All
You have a quorum.
Yeah. Okay. As long as we've got it. Okay. All right, Chief. Thank you. Thank you very kindly. Also, if I could, thank you to you, the Police Auxiliary, for the Memorial Day event. It was very nice, very well done, and we really appreciate it. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Also,
Thank you.
good luck to your daughter tomorrow night. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. There we go. Nice. All right. All right. We've now moved on to item 10A, council committee reports. Anything to report out, folks? I'll mention a couple things. Mike, who's not here, has kindly offered to serve on both citizens rate review and transportation safety, as I'm not able to get to those always. So he's going to sit in on some of those. What else? I haven't mentioned this to anybody, but I was recently appointed to the SEDCOR board. So for what's that's worth. So hopefully that will mean more economic development for Newberg. So there we go. And other than that, Sue's giving me the cue. There it is. All right. So committees, student commissioners is the subject. And I know I've talked to at least Stephanie and Denise about this. We have received, amazingly enough, 13 applications for 5 positions, which is fantastic. So now the question becomes that gets to be a little bit cumbersome for the entire council, because that will mean multiple work sessions. So we were wondering, would you all be supportive of making a subcommittee to do the interviews for the students for the recommendation to you all? Does that sound like a reasonable thing? All right, next question. Who would be willing to serve on said subcommittee? I will. Denise and I. Anyone else? Elise, yes. Denise, Stephanie?
Depends when is it, like, I'm
Oh,
wedding
I'm
planning
trying
right
to
now,
figure out.
so.
It
Yeah,
would be June 23rd and 24th at 6:30
Yeah.
is what you told Zyra.
right,
So
right. 23rd.
Yeah, I can't do June 24th. We have another like a listening session.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Denise, for now, it's you and I, unless any of you all change your mind and you decide to join the fun. It's, hey, get to interview 13 kids. This is going to be awesome fun. So, hey, we don't have, Bryce isn't here. Mike's not here.
Bryce volunteered earlier.
Did he?
Remember,
Okay.
he said
There we
he
go.
was.
Cool. All right, good. We'll get Bryce in there and that'll be great. Okay.
Okay, so Denise, Bryce, and Rick.
Denise, Bryce, Rick, right. Okay. And then, okay, on other updates on committees. So we recently, we weren't exactly sure how you wanted to proceed. So Denise and Stephanie and I talked about two other committees that need appointments. The first one being historic preservation. We got, I think, 4 applications for that. I don't know if you all, the rest of you would like to see it or if you're happy with our recommendation. That's one. And then the second one is citizens rate review. We have 2 direct applications and then one other person who would be willing, it wasn't their first choice, but we willing to serve, and that is 3 vacancies. So if you're okay with that, we will make those recommendations at our next meeting. Does that work? I'm getting nods. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's what we'll do. And then Sue has threatened that the subcommittee on committees will soon be meeting again to further delve into the subject of committees. So
Yes, I did write a War and Peace to-do list.
yeah, yeah, exactly right. So more on that to come. All right. Anything else? Any other committee stuff you guys want to mention? Okay. All right. I will then adjourn this meeting. The City Council business session is now adjourned, and I will hand the proverbial gavel to Council President Finley, and we're moving on to our next item of the evening.
Thank you, Mayor Rogers. So I am going to call this meeting to order. Stu, can you do a roll call for me?
Yes. And for this, we'll be addressing you as directors. So that's why it's going to sound a little different. Okay. Director McBride, I think he had to go. Director Cofield is absent. Director Yarnell Holloman. Here. Director Martinez Plancarte.
Here.
Director Rogers.
Here.
Director Bacon.
Here.
Chair Finley.
Here.
Okay.
And it looks like, Sue, we just got in the chat that John Bridges is here too.
Okay.
Okay. Looks like we don't have anything on the consent calendar. Do we have any public comments, Sue?
I have not received any public comments for this evening's Newberg Urban Renewal Agency meeting.
Thank you. So we're on to new business. We have the NERA Resolution 2021-02. It's a resolution directing staff to begin the formal public review process of adoption of an urban renewal plan. And I will let you take it away, Doug.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our journey continues on putting together the urban renewal program. So we are at that point in the process that's outlined by statute, which is the referral of the plan, the report to the taxing districts. So we have with us this evening, Elaine Howard, our consultant of record. We're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. So Elaine's going to kind of walk through what the role of the agency is, and then we're going to do an Urban Renewal 101 crash course again. And it's always a good reminder as we've touched this over the last year and a half. And then I will go through and talk about the various projects and those components that are in the proposal that's in front of you. So Elaine, all you have to do is ask Sue to go to the next slide.
Next slide, please, Sue. So the role of the Urban Renewal Agency in the adoption of a new urban renewal plan is to review the planning report and determine whether to send it out for the formal public review process. That process includes the consult and confer period with the taxing districts, which requires a 45-day time period for Planning Commission review for conformance with the comprehensive plan, presentation to the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, a city council hearing that includes a citywide notice, and a city council vote on a non-emergency ordinance. Next slide. The first and most important thing for anyone watching is that urban renewal is not a new tax. A lot of people are confused because we talk about an urban renewal district and we talk about taxes and tax increment financing. But the important thing to remember is it is not a new tax on property tax payers. And we will explain in the next few slides how urban renewal works and where that money comes from. Next slide, please. This is a little crash course, Urban Renewal 101. So in Oregon, when we pay our property taxes, the assessor takes our property tax revenue and allocates it out to all of the regular taxing jurisdictions. Taxing jurisdictions are entities like the city, the county, the school district, the Parks and Recs boards. Next slide. In Oregon, property taxes increase for two reasons. They increase by an annual limit of a 3% appreciation. So if you own a property in Oregon and you do no improvements to it, the assessor still may increase your assessed value by 3% every year. When you get your property tax bill, a lot of times people get confused because the real market value will go up more than that 3%. The assessed value is, however, the number on which you pay your property taxes. And the assessed value is limited to a 3% appreciation, except if you do substantial improvements or new construction on your property. If you do substantial improvements or new construction, that value may go up more than the 3%. Next slide. When an urban renewal area is formed in a city, and the assessor increases the value within that area, that increase in value after the area is formed is called the increment. And that incremental increase value produces what's known as tax increment funds or tax increment financing. I'm hoping if you click more, the animation will happen here. Those areas, I never know when that's going to work in some other cities form. Can you try clicking it again? No, let's go backwards. There should be a blue bar that goes to the left and shows that when an urban renewal area is formed, the assessor creates what is called a frozen base of assessed value. All of the property tax revenues off of that frozen base of assessed value continue going to all of those taxing districts. And any increased value from the time an urban renewal area is formed goes to the urban renewal agency. Next slide. The impact of urban renewal, or where that money actually comes from, is from other taxing districts. And that is why it is not coming from individual property tax payers. So it does not provide new money, but it directs funds that would already be paid by property taxpayers to the urban renewal agency instead of directing those funds to the other taxing districts. Again, they continue receiving the taxes on that frozen base value, so the value at the time the urban renewal area is established, but they temporarily forego the taxes on any growth in that urban renewal area over the time period of urban renewal. In many areas, and the Newberg area is certainly key in this, is that growth would not have occurred if not for the improvements that urban renewal is able to make. That is especially true where you need substantial infrastructure within an area to allow for new development to occur. And if that infrastructure is not put in, that development is unable to occur. Again, what we want to make sure people understand is that this financing tool only pertains to the urban renewal boundary. It does not pertain to the entire city of Newberg. So that frozen base of assessed value is just for the area within the urban renewal boundary. And the division of taxes from the taxing districts also only applies within that urban renewal area. Next slide. Schools and education service districts are treated differently. There is what we call an indirect impact to the schools and education service districts. Next slide. In a normal taxing district situation, the impact is directly on those other taxing districts. The impact is on those local property tax revenues. Those local property tax revenues typically go straight to the taxing district so that they can make expenditures. Next slide. For schools in Oregon, this is what their funding looks like. It is very confusing and a bit convoluted. So local property tax revenues go to what is called the state school fund. And the state school fund allocates out on a per pupil basis to each school district funding for the school year. So the urban renewal impact is on the local property taxes, which are a component of all of the different funding sources that comprises the local school fund. So the local school fund also has state revenues, it has some federal revenues, it has grants from the federal government. And what the legislature does when they meet, and I think they're just going through that process right now in Salem, or maybe just finished it, is look at the different funding sources and present an overall state school fund amount that then is divided out to all of the different school districts across the state on a per pupil allocation. If you have urban renewal in your community, you get no fewer dollars from that per pupil allocation than any other community that does not have urban renewal. Urban renewal is not a factor in how much money your school district gets. It is a factor in the total amount of money that the legislature looks at to decide how to fill that state school fund. So that's why we call that an indirect impact on schools. Next slide. This goes back to Doug.
Thank you, Elaine. So the city council created an ad hoc committee. They met 8 times in developing the plan and the report. And Sue, you might want to promote John up, so if he has any comments when we get towards the end, he'll have that opportunity.
Do that. I can't do it while I'm sharing a screen.
Okay. The public engagement, and we've shared before that we've done things on our web page, social media, we've done video presentations, and those are up on the project website. We've continuously given briefings to the city council and the planning commission. And probably really key in all of this is, as we were going through developing the plan and the report, is that we were sharing the information with all the taxing districts. There were a few meetings that was kind of more perfunctory, a lot of detail, but when we got to those key points, we made sure that we were sharing that information with all the administrative heads. So the district that's proposed is approximately 600 acres in size. The maximum indebtedness amount is $106.4 million. And so you can see in the graphic, we have the riverfront area, which is about 460 acres of that 600. And then we've got the 2 connecting with the streets, with River Street and with Blaine Street. And so the earlier comment we had tonight on the public comments, I will talk with our Mr. Greer and let him know that what this urban renewal program is proposing. And of course, then we have the downtown area. And as Elaine mentioned earlier, urban renewal is not a new tax, and it's always important to remind people, and I have been doing that as I've been giving presentations, it does not increase your property taxes. So it's a redirecting those taxes that are already being paid. Next slide, Sue. And next one, I forgot I've just been talking along because I know this stuff. Keep going. There we go. My bad. Keep going. One more. I'm rambling along. So the ad hoc committee broke the area into sub areas. So that's a 600 acre area. And so what we have is sub area A, which is the mill site, which is the industrial portion. And in that, there were transportation, water, wastewater, and stormwater improvements and the Esplanade Trail. So what you see in the drawing is the brown, which is the transportation, which would have the underground infrastructure. And then the green is that Esplanade Trail that runs from River Street back to the east towards the Waterline Bridge. Sub-area B is south of the bypass and to the west of River Street. And there, you'll see the brown is transportation, water, wastewater, stormwater improvements in River Street and 14th Street. And there's also some multi-use path trails. So you'll see some greens, the Esplanade that goes from River Street up along the top of the bank. And then there's the bypass trail that comes down River Street and on 14th Street. So next slide. Sub-area C is north of the bypass and basically to the west of the railroad line. And this is primarily for wastewater infrastructure. So there's a new pump station. So 2 pump stations would be decommissioned, new gravity lines would come into this pump station, then a force main would take it back towards River Street. What's important about this pump station is also serves sub-area B. So as new development is occurring there, the wastewater will actually go underneath the bypass and then go back to this pump station. Sub-area D is between the railroad line and River Street. And the primary roads here is Blaine Street. And so that would be an extension of a road that does not exist. And that is needed to accommodate the growth within the riverfront area. We have College Street, which was brought up earlier this evening in public comments. And of course, then we've got railroad crossings, and that happens in sub-area B and in sub-area D. We got those rail crossings, and as traffic volumes increase, we'll get to a point that those will have to have the gate arms and the signals and so forth installed. Sue, next slide. Sub-area E is to the east of River Street and north of the bypass. And in this one, the focus is on River Street, basically from 9th Street to the south side of the bypass. And again, it's not only just the street, but it's the underground infrastructure that goes along with it. Sub-area F goes from 9th Street to 3rd. Again, it's along River Street. So that is improving River Street. Yes, the road is in not great condition. The sidewalks are narrow. We don't have ADA ramps, and we have underground infrastructure improvements that are necessary. Next slide. So then we go to sub-area G, which is Blaine Street. And as we were going through this process, the new mill site owner did appeal their tax bill. So we actually had to have an extra meeting of the ad hoc committee because we had to reduce some of our project costs because of those new values. So the Blaine Street is really looking at some underground infrastructure. The curb to curb is already there. Sub-area H is the downtown, and there's a variety of things that are going on. So the brown line is 2nd Street. So that's the road diet. So that's getting rid of one travel lane, having the wider sidewalks. There are sections that will continue to need 3 lanes. The blue is water lines, and this is to jumpstart the infill development on the vacant lots. We have undersized water lines. The circles, we need new traffic signals at Blaine and Hancock, and Blaine at First, an intersection improvement at Hancock and College. Then there's the undergrounding of the utility lines along 2nd Street. So to try to get that multi-story residential housing. TVF&R cannot get through the fire lines and all the telecommunication lines to have that type of development. So that needs to be undergrounded. And then there are 2 public parking lots that are identified. Next slide. The ad hoc committee did do their recommendation. And this is an opportunity after I get done, John can chime in. So they met on May 24th and they reviewed the plan and the report. And they voted to forward the urban renewal plan and report to the agency with a recommendation for a referral to the taxing districts. John, you have any comments?
Yeah, I do have a couple comments. what I would tell the agency is some of our priorities as volunteer people who met, you know, all of the different taxing districts that are going to be impacted were on our committee or are on our task force. And so we've kind of gotten buy-in from all of them as we've gone along. One of our biggest priorities was we wanted to make sure that if you're going to do any infrastructure improvement, that you do all the infrastructure improvement that you need to make something completely shovel ready. And we prioritized different zones for doing that. We prioritized industrial zone first, mixed use second, commercial third, and residential fourth, and really last, because we think it gives you the least amount of return to help fund the different projects. We also made it clear that we wanted to make sure we could leverage SDC money for any of these projects that are already identified and being collected for. And we wanted to make sure that we maximize the ability to be able to get grants, because a number of the things we're going to do are park oriented or trail oriented. And so they would be have grant money available for them. And so one of the pieces that we think is important is, and I know you guys have talked about this, is that you continue to have a volunteer group that are watching and making sure that we're still focused on those core things, and that we look at leveraging other money. We look at the urban renewal money as a part of the puzzle that helps extend all of our resources, not that it's the sole resource that fund these things. And then the last thing we put into the plan, and it's specifically in there, is we put in an end to it, because that was kind of what we considered the deal with these other taxing authorities. You know, if they're going to agree to help us do this, create a new tool for Newberg, then they've got to have planning certainty as well. So we put a 30-year end to the plan. So I just want to highlight some of those things that the committee thought was really important, and they're all in this plan. I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, John, Elaine, and Doug. Does anyone have any questions for any of these three? No questions at all. Okay, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a
Mike,
motion.
go ahead.
I will make a motion.
Oh,
I
okay.
move-
Oh,
Oh, you got one already? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So for John. So you said that you're looking at a 30-year time frame. What would it do? What would it look like if you went down to like a 20-year? What does it cause? What's the cause and effect of that?
Well, you're going to have a really constrained ability to build out the infrastructure for very much of the area.
Okay.
You know, we modeled both conservative kind of return on investment or growth rates, and we, you know, we compared. Let me give you an idea. I think our project list just in this area was, when it just came back from staff, I think it was about 190 million bucks. And we cut that down to about 116. And then we had this appeal issue from the mill site, and that took another 12 or 14 million dollars from us. So we cut another 14 million dollars from the budget. So you're really pressing to get the kind of industrial growth that we want. The family wage jobs would be really hard to get if we shaved it off. Now, Mike, if one thing that's interesting is if we get phenomenal growth, the plan can end less than 30 years. So if you build out all the projects, you get everything done, and you do it in 25 years, then the plan ends.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, now is there a motion?
I move that we accept NURA Resolution 2021-02, a resolution directing staff to begin the formal public review process of adoption of an urban renewal plan.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your left hand. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. And that's our only business tonight. So given that, we are going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. And I can't believe we got through 3 meetings before 9 o'clock tonight. Rick wins the bet.
Under 850. Wow. Phenomenal. Well done, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're adjourned.